Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us at this Your Overseas Home webinar. My name is Christopher Nye, and I'm Senior Editor at Your Overseas Home. And today we'll be chatting with Garry Walmsley from Buy Orlando Villas, all about buying property in Florida. And I have to say, I'm particularly thrilled to be back in America. I'm not there, unfortunately. Garry is, but talking about buying in America because I started my career in overseas property, editing a magazine called Everything America, and Florida is such a wonderful place to be. And Gary's going to tell us all about it, and more importantly, how we can buy our own little piece of Florida. Now, I'm just going to ask Garry to just say hi, introduce himself and Buy Orlando Villas, and then we're going to get into all the questions. Over to you, Garry.
Chris, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to join you this evening. Well, again, I guess this afternoon, we're a little bit behind you guys, so we're still feeling a little bit cooler here. But my name is Garry Walmsley. I'm a Senior Global Real Estate Advisor with Buy Orlando Villas. As you can tell from the accent, it's not a Floridian accent. It is a British accent. I moved here in 2000, but for the last 20 years have been representing Brits really with their real estate needs, whether that be buying or selling in the Central Florida market. So we're a full service real estate brokerage, which pretty much accounts for every type of product. And we specialize in and around the Disney corridor.
Okay, excellent. Thanks very much. Now, do please put your questions to Garry. You can just put them into the questions tab and we will get them answered. For you, if you forget everything or you think, oh, hang on, that was interesting, you will get a recording of the webinar sent to you afterwards. And of course, you'll have full contact details for Garry, and I hope you will contact him directly and get all your questions answered, the more detailed ones, and then you can, of course, book that flight and get out to Florida and see them for yourself. So I guess my first question is kind of an open one. How is Florida's property market? Are prices rising? Are there deals to be done? What's happening?
Yeah, Chris, I think it's one of those questions that automatically comes up with everybody that we speak to. They want to know kind of what's happening and how does it differ from their own location. So really, we have two markets I like to think of here, because we have a residential market per se, and we also have what we would consider as an Airbnb or a short-term rental market being here in Orlando. And the two right now are actually sort of, they're I guess, interceding quite nicely, but there are opportunities in one and less than the other. So as a market, as we've kind of gone through COVID and we've come out the other side, there's been obviously no shortage of press with regards to how popular Orlando has been from a destination or a relocation. For the domestic US. And a lot of that comes down to climate, healthcare, politics, taxes. I mean, there's a wealth of different bits and pieces that are happening there. But, during that point in time, I think as in the UK, property prices increased significantly. And as certainly for us, inventory dropped. And that's partly down to, what's happening with the Fed, whether that be the interest rate, just mortgage rates in general from that perspective. Obviously, the country was kind of shut off through that point from an international perspective. So right now, the way we see it is that the current market Orlando is very positive. We do, however, have inventory levels are rising quite significantly now. The last year or so, really with those, Fed rate changes, that significantly changed a lot of people's mind in terms of selling. And as we all know, real estate is all about selling and buying. So it's about supply and demand, and invariably supply actually dropped to really one of sort of record all-time lows. And as a result for that, property prices increased. But I'm pleased to say that, inventory levels are now starting to get back up, certainly across the board in the MLS area that we work in. Unfortunately, property prices are still on the increase. So those people that were sitting on the sidelines waiting for things to kind of drop through the floor, that hasn't happened. So we've seen a little bit in the last couple of months, which is pretty typical here, kind of going through those sort of winter months where people don't necessarily want to move. But we've started to see property prices again increase. Average price right now in Orlando is about $450,000, and that encompasses all different types of products, as you know. But the good thing for anybody that's really coming from the UK that's not looking for a primary residence is that I also see the largest inventory in what I classify as Airbnb or short-term rental as owned homes than I've seen in 20 years. So there are some potential opportunities. And as we don't really see probably a Fed rate reduction for the next sort of 6 months, 5-6 months or so, then I think that we're still starting to see some opportunities there. And of course, once those rates do come down, we all know what happens. Price points come up again.
Excellent. Okay, well, there's lots of information there for us to unpack over the next 30 minutes. Just to highlight for us what sort of properties are most popular amongst British and I guess other international buyers, but mainly the British market.
No, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I like to think of myself as more of a sort of a data analyst. We love recording data, and it's become more and more popular, and obviously the way technology has changed. So we've started to see, certainly now, with data being recorded all the way back to sort of 2005, different property types, and we do get reports on an annual basis. So in terms of what UK buyers really like, undoubtedly it's the single, what we classify as a single family home or a detached villa with a pool. So 58% of British buyers tend to favor that product, with just under 30% then really going sort of more towards the apartment or the condo property. And that's pretty familiar with the buyers that I work with. I primarily work with British and Canadian buyers, and they seem to like the same type of product. But undoubtedly, almost 6-1 effectively is going to be favoring that villa.
Okay, and what sort of budget would I need to be looking at one of those villas?
Well, kind of going back to the first point, I mean, obviously property prices have changed. So it is a re-education process right now. Things have changed significantly from prior to COVID from that point, where we could probably get into a 4-bed, 3-bath villa for $250,000 at that point. Right now, we're probably going to have at least another $100,000 on top of that as an entry price point. So, and again, a little bit of this comes back down to operational use, which is really one of the key questions that we try and understand directly from the clients that we work with as to what is it that they actually want to do with the property. Is it something that they truly want to keep as a second home, or is it something that they actually want to utilize as a vacation home and then offset operational costs with the rental aspect of it, which in truth, 65% of Brits actually favor that market because it's not somewhere that you can come and live generally on a full-time basis unless you're going through an extensive visa program. So really dependent upon what people are looking at, how much operational use they're looking at, as well as some of the resorts as well have changed, Chris. I don't know if you're aware, but some communities now that are zoned for short-term or Airbnb use are actually limiting now the amount of owner personal use. And in some cases, that can be as low as 30 days. So we have to kind of understand where people are. And if they're looking for something longer than that, we're probably able to get into sort of an older community. So price points are going to be in the sort of the $300,000 to $400,000 price point for a villa with a pool as an entry price point. But if they're looking for something in a resort that has a larger level of amenities, like a lot of the communities that have been built since 2012, realistically, we're probably looking at close to $500,000 as an entry price point.
Okay, well, I mean that still compares very favorably with with European hotspots, doesn't it? So even though the values have gone up, it still seems pretty affordable. What about the most popular locations for overseas buyers? Because
Sure. No, that's a great question.
The whole area. I know there's lots of suburbs, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what we've started to see a little bit in the last few years is people have been really evaluating where they actually want to have that lifestyle experience and create memories. And traditionally, if we kind of go back to when I entered the business in 2004, the largest percentage of Brits, without a doubt, unquestionably, was Orlando. And whether that was just due to, the direct flights and things like that were coming in here, and obviously the attractions of Disney. But we've started to see a little bit of a change. Central Florida still actually has the largest amount. About 36% of Brits favor Orlando or Central Florida as their desired location. We've also started to see in the last couple of years, sort of more affluent buyers tend to favor sort of like the Miami to sort of West Palm Beach. So sort of down on that Treasure Coast, that southeastern Florida market. And then a smaller percentage tends to go down to sort of the Gulf Coast, so Tampa to Sarasota. So really, we've got three key areas: Central, Southeast, and Southwest, which isn't too dissimilar actually from pretty much every other international demographic that comes in here. I think most people will have a favorite location, whether that be for family in Orlando, especially if they're looking for the rental, if they're looking for sort of more of a higher end property and maybe a little bit of partying. And then if you sort of want, something to do a little bit more on the water side, the Gulf Coast seems to be quite a key favorite for sure.
And how about deciding between, say, Kissimmee or Davenport or Celebration? Are those? Is there a particular place that you would recommend, or that is favoured?
Well, I think, again, kind of going back to my original point, you mentioned three cities there. You mentioned Davenport, Kissimmee, and Celebration. So if someone's looking to rent short term, then Celebration is out because there's no Airbnb or short term rental options in Celebration. It's a primary location. It's good if someone's looking for a buy to let property that they never want to use, but they're looking just for an asset. So that's an option. But you mentioned Davenport and Kissimmee, and this is something that kind of comes up in a lot of conversations with clients. In truth, we don't really favor necessarily Davenport or Kissimmee one over the other. We have an area here called Four Corners, which you're probably familiar with. It's sort of on that north end of that golden triangle, which is really where a lot of cities and counties intersect. And in truth, it's actually really more about the resort now. So it's about the resort name, where you're looking to, because we are creatures of habit. And when you get 74 million people coming in here per annum, a lot of the people are coming back and they're actually repeat visitors. And I think that once we find somewhere that we like, we tend to stay in the same place over and over again. But we've also started to see a number of newer communities that have come out of the ground since 2012. When we say newer, I mean, it's 12 years ago. But the vacation industry really took a bit of a change in 2012, with a lot of larger communities coming out of the ground, kind of what we consider as horizontal hotels now, which was really sort of devised through that depression period of 08 to 12. But, if someone's favoring something to rent out on a short term or an Airbnb market, and they're going to be here for 2 to 4 weeks of the year, then, one of the newer communities, one of sort of the premier resorts, sort of like a Champions Gate, a Solara, Story Lake, Windsor at Westside, those sorts of communities actually do very, very well from that point because they have a larger amenity section. If you're looking to come out and purchase a property and maybe spend 3 or 4 months here, then you probably don't necessarily want that transient market as much. So you could probably look at sort of some of those older communities, and that might be the sort of likes of Windsor Hills or Terra Verde, Southern Dunes, those sort of places where they haven't necessarily got the aspect of it. They may be a little further away from the main theme parks, and they also probably offer better value for money per square foot. But the rental aspect of it, the rental potential or offset potential, is going to be a little less.
Okay. Your camera's readjusted itself, so we've lost you for a moment, but hopefully we can still hear you. Okay, let's get on to how to buy. Now, you're a licensed realtor. Can you just very simply, what does that mean? The realtor element.
Okay, so we have real estate agents and we have realtors in Florida or across the US. The differential between a real estate agent and a realtor is that we both passed respective tests, but at the same time, a realtor has actually taken the next stage, and they've actually become a member of the National Association of Realtors. And that really allows us and requires us to abide by a code of ethics. In addition to that, we also are then licensed with the National Association of Realtors. We're licensed with the Florida Association of Realtors, and also licensed then with the I'm a member of the Orlando Regional Realtors Association. So I have 3 entities that I'm actually reporting to and licensed with. So that does really give a lot of people a little bit more reassurance. In addition to that, I'm also a resort and second home property specialist, as well as a certified residential investment specialist. So those are ongoing education. They're additional accreditations that I've chosen myself to actually take up, study. I like to think of myself as a student of the vacation and hospitality industry, and that's really what I do, really representing people that are coming in on a foreign national basis.
Okay, excellent. Now, there's a couple of let's work through the process of buying a property in Florida. Firstly, mortgages. Can British people get a mortgage in Florida?
The answer is unequivocally yes, absolutely.
Great.
So typically the route really, I mean, we used to see kind of back in the day, there were a number of Lloyd's used to do obviously a US mortgage and things like that. We really don't see too many UK based lending facilities now that actually will loan in Florida unless you're taking out an equity line against your existing property. So the vast majority of routes that people go, generally speaking, is through a US lender. And again, there's a number of them that we've worked with historically, for a good number of years. And generally speaking, 70% of buyers from the UK still purchasing cash, which is quite surprising. But at the same time, if you do wish to try and leverage funds, about 26% actually favor a US mortgage.
Okay. Now,
so process as well. I don't know if you want me just to kind of run through the process aspect of it, but
I think we've got so much to get through that if you don't mind, it's great to know we can get them, and we'll contact you, for further details. Are there any visas? Are there any specific requirements if we're buying a holiday property in Florida, and how long can we stay under a kind of visa waiver system?
Yeah, I mean, there's no requirement to obtain a US visa to purchase a property. And just to kind of put it out there was this misconception at one point that you buy 3 properties and you automatically get a US visa or a residency visa. That doesn't exist. But to actually purchase a property, no, we're a very friendly, welcoming for foreign nationals into the state of Florida. Obviously, a large percentage of the tax money that we generate comes from tourism, so we like people coming into here. But in terms of the visa waiver program, from that point, obviously things have changed a little bit. We no longer obviously have to fill out those was it I-94? I think it used to be, or I-94 form on the flight, which used to be all confusing. Obviously, you can now do that through an app, and you can do that online, which typically is valid for a couple of years. But in terms of access and visibility, then we can gain access to the US or to Florida for up to 180 days in any rolling 12-month period. All right. So hypothetically, if we started January 1 and we decided to spend 6 months here up until sort of June 30th or whatever, obviously this year we've got Feb 29, I don't know how that runs out, but so let's say June 30th, effectively you would have to wait until January the 1st next year to re-enter the US. Not everybody's fortunate enough to be able to spend 6 months in one period, but you could break that up over multiple visits.
Okay, excellent. So can you take us through the typical timeline for a property purchase? If we want to get one for this summer, have we left it too late, or can we still do it?
No, absolutely. I think the first thing I'd like to kind of point out a little bit is that if people are coming from the UK, generally speaking, they're looking at purchasing. The vast majority, as we've seen from the numbers, are looking to purchase a property that they can utilize for some type of rental, or they can, they're coming out for sort of, anything between sort of 2 weeks to 3 months, something of that nature. So the first thing really that we look at is the type of property that they're looking to purchase, the zoning that they're looking to have from that perspective, and then in terms of how do we go about that. So in terms of selecting that property, we can definitely look at something now for a purchase within the summer period. The second thing is that you guys love chains, all right, because it's all attached generally to a primary residential purchase. Most people here, certainly in the area and the products that I deal with, there are no chains because people are using it for the same operational use, and most properties are being sold on a fully furnished basis. So we don't run into the chain aspect. In terms of a timeline, general timelines, if you're purchasing cash, generally speaking, it's about a 30-day window from property selection, offer accepted to complete for closing. And for a mortgage purchase, it's typically double about that. It's about 55 to 60 days at this point in time. And a lot of that comes down to providing the documentation that's required to be approved for a US mortgage. So a much quicker timeline.
Brilliant. Right, you touched on it, but could you go into a bit more detail on the steps involved in buying a property in Florida?
Yeah, there's a simplified version, which obviously, given the timeline today, is probably the best thing. So, really, we would initially start a search, and obviously, on a number of different conversations, and invariably, we would create a personal portal for people, and a lot of that can be done prior to them coming out if they are looking to come out. But as we've seen through COVID, there's obviously we dealt with a lot of remote purchases through that period of time. But I would always encourage people to come out if they can do. So we would start that process really early on, and it's not like 30 days out from when you're coming. I've had some guys that I've spoken to at seminars and conferences, like A Place in the Sun. And should I mention that? No, shouldn't really. But definitely those investment shows. Some guys have taken sort of 5, 6, 7 years to actually come out and purchase. But generally speaking, we would select a property of purchase. We would then submit an offer based around a proof of funds or a mortgage pre-qualification. Those are two prerequisites that we do now have to provide when we're making any offer on any property. As with any property purchase, that gets submitted, and then the next stage really will be waiting for that review of that counter offer. So here we obviously have a yes, a no, or we have some sort of negotiation that's involved. Once we've kind of gone through that, that's really when our time starts, because that's when we classify as the contract offer being executed. And that's when our surveys and checks start to kick in. So all of the offers, first and foremost, all of the offers that we write, they're on a legal documentation approved by the state of Florida. This isn't something that we're handwriting. All right, everything here, it's pretty outlined. Obviously, we're in a country that loves to sue. So from that perspective, it's actually outlined very specifically on what everybody's requirements are, whether you're a buyer or a seller, agents as well within that. So if we go through the surveys correctly, and of course, obviously, there's always something that comes up on an inspection or a survey, and that's kind of like a second negotiation stage. And of course, not every seller is required to actually replace or repair everything. Not every home obviously is in a new condition, but there's also things as well when you're working with a lender that you get a little bit more of a protection. One, from an appraisal standpoint, and of course, obviously, the last few years we're going through COVID, you've probably seen as well as keeping your eye on what's happening in the States. Price points have just been all over the place. People have been buying a property. There's been multiple offers. It's how much do you want that property? And sometimes appraisals really aren't important to some buyers, but for a lot of buyers, they are. And of course, we want to make sure that we get value for money. So then we typically would move on to completion. And that's obviously something where we also get involved, which we do on every step of this. We're really here. We're kind of like your eyes and ears to make sure that, we are protecting you at every stage of the process. And that's a very simplified version. Obviously, there's a lot of different steps that we would take care of. But in truth, if you have a good realtor, then ultimately there's a lot of things that really should look very seamless to you, whether you're remote or you're actually coming here to select your property, be here for your inspection, and obviously also be here for closing. So not everybody can be here for all of that. So we tend to find that people are here for the front end of a transaction, but not necessarily here actually for the last part, for the completion. Although they will want to be here pretty quickly after they've completed so they can utilize their property.
Okay, excellent. Now, how much should we be budgeting for buying costs?
Okay, great question. Again, a little bit that's going to come down to from whether or not you're purchasing cash or you are purchasing with a mortgage. So from a cash purchase, it's pretty straightforward. Generally speaking, closing costs are going to be anything between about 1.8 to 2.5%. And the reason there's a sliding scale there is that we do have some things in Florida that we pay in arrears, which is namely one of the largest one will be real estate taxes. So from that perspective, real estate taxes here are paid in arrears. Generally speaking, if we were to let's say hypothetically that we were purchasing March 31st this year, the real estate taxes for that property in this current year would not actually be due until April the 15th next year. So the tax ordinances aren't actually provided until November the 1st. So as a result for that, for those 90 days that a seller has owned the property, a buyer actually receives a credit for those real estate taxes on their closing costs. The buyer then is responsible for the real estate taxes in November. So that's the reason for the sliding scale that's there. In terms of a mortgage purchase, your loan origination fees with your lender will increase that figure. And it may well be the fact that those figures sort of jump up to between sort of 5 to 6%, including your closing costs, based on any additional fees that you may have to pay, as well as mortgage origination costs.
Okay, fantastic. So, what sort of are there any common mistakes that the British buyers make when buying property in Florida? Any pitfalls that we should avoid?
Yeah, I think it goes back a little bit to a couple of things I've mentioned, a couple of points in terms of operational use. I hear on a number of occasions, and not just Brits, but people from all over the world that come in that actually do work with, and this isn't a knock on residential realtors that just sell primary real estate, because there's 26,000 of them here in Central Florida. But if people are looking to utilize this as a second home or something that is zoned for short-term rental use, make sure that you work with someone that actually specializes it. That's their niche. Because invariably they will be able to tell you all about rules and regulations in terms of that rental use. We started to see, and I don't know if you've been following, but since COVID, we saw a lot of people purchasing properties in rural areas across the United States. We've seen a lot of people purchasing property in Denver now. A lot of that now is starting, those regulations were never put in place for the zoning of short-term rental properties. And the local taxing authorities now are starting to kick back, as well as residents, because they don't want the transient market there. So we're now starting to see in Denver, there's a bill that's just been passed that, if you're owning a property zoned for that, or you're operating it that way, your real estate taxes are going to increase about 300% next year. Same thing in Palm Springs. We've started to see now that only 20% of the properties that are currently being operated for short-term rental in Palm Springs have actually now got a license for it. So there's 80% of people that have purchased a property for an intended use that actually is not legal. So make sure that you're working with people for rules and regulations, that's what they do on an everyday basis. And a lot of the points that I've made today, if you don't mind me saying, is that we have a very in-depth and comprehensive Orlando Buyers Guide, which is literally under that URL, orlandobuyersguide.com. And it really it's a blueprint for people that are looking to do, like everybody on this call, that are looking and interested to find out more for resources, as well as educate themselves further. So I think that's a big thing, is educate yourself. Make sure that you work with a real estate agent that is knowledgeable in the market that you're looking at, and for the type of property or intended use that you have of that property.
Okay. We've run out of time, but we have got quite a few questions. So if you don't mind sticking around for another 5 minutes.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely not.
Now, I worked on a cruise ship through the hurricane season in the Caribbean. I know it can get awfully windy down your way. A key step when buying in the UK would be getting a survey. How do we make sure our property is weatherproof and fit to live in?
No, absolutely. So part of the survey process that we would go through after someone's actually looking at purchasing a property, and obviously that's a condition as any part of any purchase offer or purchase agreement, is having a full survey or inspection. So we only work with licensed real estate inspectors. I've actually worked with the same one actually for 18 years. So he's the first person to tell me that my client doesn't need to be looking at that property for whatever reason it may be. But certainly, obviously, hurricane is a key one. But in addition to that, under the insurance policies that we have here, it's split down into 4 different sectors. So the first one actually would be, general reconstruction of that property. Then we also have, I don't know why my thumb's come up, but it has on my camera anyway. But we then also have the contents, kind of like a contents insurance, which obviously covers everything on the inside of the property from a rebuilt standpoint and obviously a replacement standpoint. The third piece of that is liability. All right, something that's becoming more popular, obviously, in the UK, liability insurance, but we obviously love it over here. So you have to make sure that, if Uncle Johnny's staying at your property and he's had a few too many beers and he's hit his head on the side of the pool, then it's the owner's responsibility. It's not his responsibility. So every management company will require that you probably have a minimum of $300,000 of liability insurance. Some of them actually may have up to $1 million umbrella against that property. And the last point is actually hurricane excess. All right. So certainly if you're purchasing a property via mortgage, then every lender will require that hurricane excess is built into that insurance policy.
Great. We've had a question from Ian, who's asked, how does a typical US mortgage compare to a UK buy-to-let mortgage? For example, loan to value, term of fixed interest, and so on.
Yeah, there's a number of different options in truth. Now, just note that I'm not a qualified mortgage broker, so I'm aware of obviously how it works. But for more information, I would rather refer Ian back to a number of colleagues that I work with. But there are different options that are available. We typically still work off of conventional loans that have a 30-year term, so everything's amortized over a 30-year term. There are 10 and 15 and 20-year options that are available. But in the market that we're in as well now, we also have debt service coverage ratio options as well from that perspective. So, we can now start to look at rental income properties that generate rental income, and we can actually take that towards the mortgage. Generally speaking, from an international point, you're probably looking at a minimum of 25% as a deposit because of the credit record issue. Obviously any US lender does not have any credit record for anybody else outside of the US. More often than not, though, that's probably going to be closer to 30% at the present time. If someone looking to purchase, which is basically the same thing. I lost you quickly. Have you got me back?
I think you're back. Yeah. Your camera's gone off, but we can still hear you.
Okay. In that case, generally speaking, there's a very limited number of lenders that are out there because it's classified as a non-warrantable condo. Mm-hmm. So there we're looking probably between 40 to 45% as a deposit level. But I'd be happy to provide Ian some additional information or make personal introductions to a number of associates that can provide him additional information based upon his own specific requirements and situation.
Sure. Okay. In terms of renting a property out, 2 questions. Firstly, property management. What will we be paying in percentage terms for property management, and and all the services, the cleaning, and all that? And also, what happens about tax on our profits? Who do we pay that to? How is that organised?
All right, so let's split that up first and foremost to the property management side. From the property management side, there's no apples to apples. All right, there's a lot of different options that are here. There's about 1,200 different management companies in Central Florida. So it's important, again, to kind of understand how an owner wants to operate that property. But what I would say is that a management company, if you're going down that route, that is the biggest piece of the jigsaw, because ultimately those are the people that are responsible for putting rental income into your property. So it's imperative that you do your research. Again, work with someone that is knowledgeable in that area. And the way that we do it is that the management aspect of it never comes up until we start to really identify and hone in on where people are looking to purchase. Because what we're able to do then is actually look at and recommend a number of different operators within that location that we know do a great job. I work with probably about a dozen different management companies. I've never worked with just one, because I haven't found one yet that actually can manage every property in every location the way that everybody wants it. But in terms of rates, things can change anything from 10% to 45% based upon the product, the level of amenities and services that are provided by that management company. And the key thing is that this is a full-time job. It's a very competitive market in Orlando, but there are strength in numbers, and that's very evident in terms of the regulation aspect that's here. So I would say that, again, that's a full conversation. Again, you can find a number of dedicated pages on our website and buyer's guide that are devoted to that. Now, on the taxation front, again, there's a lot of benefits for people. Firstly, Florida has no income tax. Okay, so that's definitely a thumbs up. And that applies to people that are obviously also looking for a property to run and operate with rental income. Now, we do pay taxes to Uncle Sam, and obviously he's one guy that you don't want to mess around with. So we make sure that you are engaged with a foreign national CPA or someone that obviously can file your taxes. But generally speaking, for the average purchase price of properties, if people are actually operating it as a vacation rental property, then because of the thresholds that are in place, and again, it's depending on how many people are actually on that property deed, then there's a number of tax incentives that you can write off just like every other business from that point. So very few people actually pay a very large amount of tax here. Generally speaking, most people actually pay nothing from a tax perspective, just as a vacation rental property. Because bear in mind, you can also write a percentage of your flights off. You can rent a percentage of your car hire off. You're operating it as, this should be operated as a business. All right. Don't look at anything else. You are going in, you are creating a business, and that's what you can do. Just on that point, one of the other things that does come up, Chris, is with regards to capital appreciation. What happens with that? And again, Florida they have a very favorable rule from that perspective, that if you are looking at purchasing a piece of real estate and holding it, this is not a flip game. All right, this is a mid to long-term hold option for most people. But generally speaking, if you're looking at capital appreciation, anything on that capital appreciation up to $49,000, there's zero income tax to be paid on that. Okay. Once you get to the next level, it kind of jumps to 200. It's 50 to 459,000, and that's based at 15%. Anything in excess of that, it's a 20% tax. So very favorable for a lot of people, which is the reason why we have so many foreign purchases here.
Yeah. Okay. We have run out of time now. Is there anything else that you want to get across to British people buying in Florida that we haven't covered?
I think the key thing first and foremost is, if you're looking to do this, make sure that you do research and educate yourself with people that are in the market. Make sure that you have someone on the ground, and it doesn't have to be me. Obviously, I'd love it to be me. That's what we do for a living, and we've represented hundreds of thousands of people purchasing property in this market. But make sure that you are well represented. Have some conversations. Test their knowledge from that point. Again, I don't mind sitting down with someone, and send me any questions. I think the largest number of questions I've had someone ever sent me in an email was 113 questions. I don't ask that anybody sends me 113 questions anymore, but what I will say and what I will give to everybody is the fact that we've been in the market a long time. We also have surrounded ourselves with associates in their respective businesses, and none of us try and cross the lines. We all work together collectively to make sure that everybody is protected at every stage of the process. But I'll also say that if I don't know an answer, I will tell you flat out that I don't know the answer to that question. We will find out and we'll both learn something the same day. So just
Fantastic.
education, research, and then once you've done it, act on it. All right. There's no reason why, if you are looking to do something, don't wait. Wait is definitely not going to happen. So if you look at all the numbers back to 1957, in any of those cases, there's never really been a reason for people to sit down and wait. All right. Regardless of what the interest rates are, regardless of what the Fed are doing, Orlando is a destination that a lot of people are moving to. Florida in general, again, the same from that point. You know, we have 1,000 people a day moving to Orlando, and 1,000 people a week, and about the same number of that moving to Florida on a daily basis. So there's a lot of things, a lot of reasons why you would come here, whether that's year-round sunshine, proximity to world-class attractions, 7 of the world's top 10, 8 next year with Universal Epic opening, record-breaking tourism, easy to access, speak the same language. There's a wealth of reasons why people would consider Orlando. It's not the answer for everyone, but if you are looking at it, make sure that you do your research, educate yourself, and then act with someone that actually fits with how you want to operate.
Fantastic. I've been admiring the villa and on the picture behind you, thinking how lovely those Florida villas are.
Yeah, that's a nice one. That's actually in Reunion. So that was one of the original purpose-built vacation homes, which in truth, that's another subject, how things have changed here in terms of trends and what's happened with the market. We no longer build 3 and 4 bed residential floor plan properties that are zoned for short-term rental. Everything is purpose-built for vacation rental. And that's, again, part of the questions that we have straight up the front with people. And also in an effort to really understand what their exit strategy is. So that's something that we get into before we even look at a property. What are your intentions? What are the reasons behind it? Why are you doing this? Why are you contemplating it? So, but yeah, Chris, come back out and we can go and visit a few of those.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I think I will do. Well, thanks very much, Garry, and thank you for Buy Orlando Villas for being such a wealth of information and inspiration to us this afternoon. We will send you people viewing. We will send you Garry's contact details. If you're watching on demand, we will also contact Garry. We will be talking a lot more about Florida at our virtual event, which is on Saturday, the 16th of March, not too far away. And you can speak to currency experts and healthcare insurance and all sorts of people. So do register for the Your Overseas Home virtual event. It's going to be our biggest one ever. I think there's a link just come up there. We one other favor is we are on Trustpilot. So if you could possibly say something nice, find something nice to say about us, it would be really helpful if you could just leave us a review on Trustpilot. So enough pleading from me. Do contact Garry, and we hope you buy that fantastic property in Florida. Thank you very much, Garry, and thank you very much to you for viewing. Bye-bye.
Chris, thank you so much, and thank you to everyone.
Right. And press the right button.